gotten through that lighthearted part of the program, we now come to the centerpiece, which is not really a lighthearted story at all, except that because we associate it with a Disney film, it has been generally considered more lighthearted than it is, perhaps. This is, of course, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, the symphonic poem by Paul Dukas, or Dukas as he is generally known in this country. Dukas, if you will pardon my continuing to refer to him that way, falls into that rather unfortunate club of composers who are only remembered for a single piece. And usually when this happens, the one piece that they are remembered for is a piece that they particularly dislike. And such was the case with Dukas, because he wrote it as kind of a joke. As a matter of fact, he called it a scherzo, which is Italian for joke. And he was really annoyed when it took off as well as it did. But he's partly to blame because he was such an absurdly self-critical composer, and he destroyed a lot of his other compositions. So if this is the one that we remember him for, then, and he didn't want us to, maybe he should have left us more of his compositions. So that, as it is, there's a ballet suite and there's a symphony, and I'm not sure, there are a few other compositions, but this is the one piece that he's remembered for. And it's been on my list of things that I wanted to arrange for piano for a long time. So I've performed a number of my own transcriptions here, including the 1812 Overture, the New World Symphony, Les Préludes by Franz Liszt, and then a number of other orchestral pieces, but arranged by other musicians or composers. Anyway, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, the story of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, believe it or not, goes as far back, at least we have a record of it going as far back as the year AD 150. And I'm referring to a collection of tall tales by the Greek writer Lucian. And I forget the precise name, I think it's something like Lover of Lies, and or however that's said in Greek, but that's the name of the character. And other characters take turns telling him tall stories or absurd stories, and this is one of them. And it follows the story as we know it almost exactly, except that instead of a broom, it's a pestle that the apprentice enchants. But anyway, the story is that there's an apprentice, there's a sorcerer and his apprentice, and the sorcerer has told his apprentice to go fetch water from a well and fill up a cauldron or something. And the apprentice is getting tired from doing all this manual labor. So the sorcerer steps out on an errand, and the apprentice thinks, well, I think I know enough magic to be able to save myself a little work. So he enchants the pestle, in later versions a broom, and tells the pestle to go fetch water from the well, which it does, until the cauldron is full and he realizes he doesn't know how to stop it. So then, after trying in vain to cast the spell in reverse or cast the spell again or whatever, he chops the pestle in several pieces. And then all the pieces keep moving and bring even more water than before, until finally the sorcerer comes back and stops the whole process. Well, then several centuries later, in the year 1797 exactly, Goethe publishes a poem by the title Der Zauberlehrling, or The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it follows the original tale out of the Greek almost exactly. The only striking difference is that in Goethe's version, there's really no humor, whereas in the Lucian version, it's just a bunch of laugh-out-loud tales. And I think the key to this difference is the year 1797, the chaos of the French Revolution would have been fresh in everyone's minds, and it's quite possible that Goethe meant it as a political parable for the phenomenon of starting something and then letting it spiral out of control. In any case, 100 years later exactly, after the publication of that poem, Paul Dukas wrote his symphonic poem inspired by the Goethe poem. And then, of course, the musical piece was the inspiration 43 years later for the Mickey Mouse version, which many of us are familiar with. The Mickey Mouse version actually takes it just a step further. Instead of just chopping the broom in two, which is what happens in the Goethe poem, Mickey Mouse chops the broom into many pieces, and then all the pieces become brooms themselves, and you have an entire army of brooms. So you pick whichever one you want to imagine while I'm playing this. This is The Sorcerer's Apprentice.